today. You know her. She's with me every week coming from California, but today she's in the great state of Texas. Sierra Claire, foreign policy expert. So good to see you in person.
So great to be with you in person, Vanessa. This is actually my first time at CPAC, if you can believe that.
I'm so happy that you're here and that you're here with us at LindellTV in the booth. You have been talking to so many different people for your new podcast that you have out. Yesterday, we talked to Colton just before you came on about how they started the event yesterday for the public, the International Summit. What did you take away from that? Isn't that interesting? You know, we talk about foreign affairs all the time, but it's interesting they started about how we need to work with other countries. And that to me really sent a message that yes, we need to take care of our home country, but we need to work with other countries as well. What did you take away from that?
Well, this is exactly a great point, Vanessa. The CPAC is on this, and it is something that really needs to be addressed. And it's great that CPAC is doing it. I hope more, organizations join in, because this is really a global fight. And when you look at what are the things wrong in America, a lot of them are connected to foreign affairs or foreign funding, foreign NGOs, immigration issues. All of these things are interconnected, throughout the globe. And number one, if we can address some of those issues, as Mercedes was talking about yesterday, in South America, and help people thrive in their countries there, that helps immigration. But another thing is that our partners in Western Europe and our partners in Central Europe, they're struggling with a lot of the same things we're facing here, democratic backsliding. And that's a, fancy word that you hear all the time. But what it really means, the left uses it to talk about authoritarianism, but what it actually means is what we're facing right here in the USA, which is, rigged elections, a rigged media, and people being censored.
You're absolutely right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because those are one of the main things that we fight here in this network is LindellTV, is the rigged elections and the rigged media. People are just tired of being rigged and not being able to trust the system, trust the people, trust who's in charge, trust the machines. Nobody trusts the machines. Of course not. We just don't trust. Americans have an issue with trust. And so that was all discussed yesterday. Colton and I talked about it just a little bit ago, how other countries are trying to bring their beliefs into America. And President Trump is doing a good job with Venezuela, with Iran, with Cuba. Looks like it might be next in line to save these people from these horrible communist regimes. That was discussed yesterday. Communism creeping into America. Take a listen.
We are citizens of the state that used to fight during the communist time against the communist regime. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki personally was one of the figures. He was a young man back then, but he was actively fighting communist regime, Soviet regime in my home country. Mercy knows this story very well. So it's very awkward that we are actually talking about the coming back of communism, and we are in the beautiful state of Texas. And in the United States, this is actually a political issue, regaining of the communist power actually within the United States. And I'm speaking about it because NATO was formed to fight the Russian and communist imperialism. This is the very reason for which NATO existed, and this is the reason for which in Poland overwhelmingly, I think like there's 70 or 80 or even 90% of support for NATO in Poland. The reason is very simple. For us, NATO means freedom. NATO means the great reality of Ronald Reagan, the former Prime Minister of the United States, who actually brought the freedom to the world. And we were thinking back then that we will never be a part of this free world.
Right, talking about the free world that we live in and how important it is to make sure that their ways, these people want to free these countries, but at the same time, Sierra, a lot of them want to bring those beliefs to America. Why are you wanting to bring to America what you're trying to flee.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what was discussed on that panel and what we just heard about with the communism creeping into America, and I just go back to the history. We've been in this space before. The USSR was trying to push communism in America decades ago, and we pushed back on that, and there was very strong concerns that could really shake the foundations of our country. And so I think that we need to remember that this is a real concern. This is a real threat. It's not something that's sensationalized. It's not. We talk about it on social media. We hear about it on social media all the time as kind of a quip. But this is a real threat, and we have faced it before. This is something that people tried to do to the USA because we are the most free country in the world. And so that's why people look to us to, say, what are they going to do about this? How are they going to handle it? And we want to follow their lead.
Absolutely. And, again, so many great topics yesterday that are really at the forefront of what we talk about every single day. Again, Christian persecution was huge yesterday. Colton and I talked about that earlier too. That is just an unbelievable topic, and how Christians across the world and here in America are scared to go to church. They're scared to talk about their beliefs. They don't want the persecution. And so it is okay, and we talked about this with Colton, it is okay now for people, especially after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, they're feeling more comfortable to say, I'm a Christian, and I really don't, care what anyone thinks. People were scared to come out and really talk about their beliefs before. So it awakened a sleeping giant.
Yeah.
That America, the Christians in America are really fighting for their beliefs now and being more vocal about it. Let's take a listen from the panel yesterday about what they discussed when it comes to Christianity in America.
Also, tell us, what should the U.S. be doing right now to address religious persecution globally?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is in Ephesians, Paul says that through the church, the manifold wisdom of God is being revealed, not to just earthlings, but to the heavenly realms, the authorities and powers. We as a church, it was through the church that I learned to follow Christ. It was through the church that I learned that there's a global body of believers. We are here, we're not all from the same church, same denomination, but we represent the church. And through the church, we represent who Christ is to the world. And when we see that things are happening, we recognize not just in the U.S., but outside the U.S., there's others that are Christians too. We have a responsibility for those who are being persecuted, being killed, being tortured on a daily basis. My phone goes off every day with a mutilated body from Nigeria, from other parts of Africa, of someone being persecuted and killed. But it's through the church we can elect officials that represent a global religious persecution amendment, like the country of particular concern now in Nigeria. That was done here because we have people wanting to promote religious freedom in other countries.
I think one important thing to remember is that Christians are the most persecuted religious group on the planet. And it's been that way for many, many years. And there are more Christian martyrs right now, today, than there were at the very beginning of the church, where you would have massive persecutions. But that's happening right now. It's happening right now in Nigeria, and we have Nigerian speakers here. By the thousands, more Christians are targeted and murdered for their faith in Nigeria than anywhere else, all other countries combined. But it happens all across the world. We have cases at Alliance Defending Freedom involving missionaries being kicked out of countries like Turkey. We have cases of prisoners within Egypt who've been accused of blasphemy laws, and we work to eradicate blasphemy laws all across the world.
All across the world, this is really a problem globally, and you start hearing these stories out of places like Nigeria, and the Christians who are being persecuted, the women who are in church, and we had some of that not long ago where they were kidnapped while they were at church, and so it's really a problem. And I think the first speaker there hit the nail right on the head. No matter what church you go to, it's up to these churchgoers. We're all one body. We all believe in the good Lord above. And so it's all up to us to get out and vote and make sure our leaders, like he mentioned, our leaders make sure God is first, and that this doesn't happen, and that these leaders that we elect share our same values.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, electing leaders that share our values, and as he was talking about, even in the churches as well, can be representatives and can use their voices. And I think that's what we saw at that CPAC International Faith Summit is, these are, of course, it's important to have faith involved in organizations like CPAC, and we all want that here. And, we're at CPAC, so of course we believe in that. But the other reason for it is that these people really can be tools for change. They can be the people that reach out and help these persecuted communities. And so that's why it's so important to include faith leaders as well.
Yes. So continue the good fight when it comes to your Christianity. There's more of us than them, the good versus the evil, and the good always wins. So keep doing what you do. And, I always say it's here. It starts at home. Bring back prayer around the table. Everyone eat as a family and say grace before your meals. Take your family to church on Sundays. Just go back to the simple ways of life. I think so many people get so busy with work and their cell phones and all the things, technology these days, that we forget what our foundation is. But never forget your foundation. Teach that to your kids, because when they go out into the real world, we do not want them brainwashed by these people who are trying to attack our children. They're our next generation, and that's what CPAC is doing this weekend. They're making sure that Christianity is at the forefront, and that we go out when everyone leaves here this weekend and goes back to their home states and home countries, that they continue that message. Let's talk about NATO and global conflicts. That was discussed yesterday. Let's take a listen to that and then get your reaction.
I think the one thing that's on people's mind that I keep hearing about when it comes to Europe is the Iran war right now. And how is our European allies, NATO allies, responding to what President Trump has clearly said is a threat to the United States, a threat to America, and yet we're finding ourselves with our NATO allies not being able to share a base, not being able to land, not being able to operationalize. We've got Spain coming out and directly contradicting us. There is a big conversation in America about NATO. The amount of money that we give, the fact that we aren't all sharing the burden the way that we should be. So I would put it out on the table to our European friends to ask, what is the state of NATO in light of what's going on with Iran?
So that was during the summit yesterday. President Trump came out early this morning and he posted this. I want to read it off to you. NATO nations have done absolutely nothing to help with the lunatic nation, now militarily decimated, that is, of Iran. The USA needs nothing from NATO, but never forget, he says, this is very important time for me in time. So he's basically saying they're a lunatic nation there in Iran. They have done absolutely nothing at NATO to help with the situation. What's your take?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I love that President Trump always reminds people that Iran he uses crazy or lunatic, because that is why we are in this fight. And that's important to remind people that, I've heard the criticism, there's lots of bad dictatorships around the world. No, Iran are lunatics, and they need to be stopped because they will do untold damage if they're allowed to reign free. With what is going on with NATO, and you just heard former Ambassador Rick Grenell talking about that, and Trump is posting about it. And it's absolutely a huge issue, because what you have is these Central and Eastern European countries who we heard from on the panel yesterday who believe in NATO, and they really they put a lot of funding into NATO and they support it because it is, bolstering their security, and it's something that they feel is very valuable to them. And then you have Western European countries who have completely abandoned NATO, as Trump pointed out, and they're not helping the U.S. as our allies. And this Iran situation would have been the perfect opportunity for them to just show almost kind of a symbolic gesture of that they believe in NATO. They believe that the U.S. is their ally, because We did so much already. They were very late to the game, and by the first weekend that it happened, they weren't even at work. And by the Monday that they were at work and they were talking about these decisions, making all these decisions, are they going to send ships, whatever, we had already decimated, a lot of the threats from Iran that would have made it very dangerous for these allies to be coming in. And so it would have been a great time for them to say, hey, you guys have, started out very strong. This is obviously a successful operation and we want to support you. Yes, you can use our bases. And they didn't do that.
Unbelievable. Another thing, as we start to wrap here, I want to bring up China. A lot of people are looking at what's China's role in this and if they're helping Iran behind the scenes. President Trump's team came out yesterday and said that there will be a meeting between the Chinese president and the president of the United States, President Trump, on May 14th and 15th. Let's take a listen to Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt about that planned meeting.
I'm pleased to announce that President Trump's meeting and a long-awaited meeting with President Xi in China will now take place in Beijing on May 14th and 15th. First Lady Melania and President Trump will also host President Xi and Madam Peng for a reciprocal visit in Washington, D.C. at a later date to be announced this year.
How critical is this meeting at this point in time?
I think it's very important that the meeting continues, and I think it's, I'm not taking it as a bad sign that it was postponed. I think it makes sense. Trump is obviously focusing on this Iran operation right now. As an American, I'm happy he's doing that. And China is also important, and I would like him to give his full attention to that in May. So I think it's great that it's continuing, and it's just been delayed, but it is a meeting that needs to happen, and it is happening.
Yes, and we'll look forward to that. And, of course, we'll have all the coverage, and we'll have you here on LindellTV to talk about that when May 14th and 15th roll around with President Trump's meeting with President Xi in Beijing. All right, for you here at CPAC, again, we are at CPAC 2026 in Dallas, Texas, right outside Dallas in Grapevine. Beautiful area of the state. Is this your first time to Texas?
This is my second time to Grapevine, but I really love this area. Yeah, it's been a great experience so far.
And you've met so many great people. You have been interviewing people. You have your new podcast out. So when you're talking to these people, what can people expect if they follow your podcast?
Absolutely. Yeah. Follow my podcast on X, on Substack. We are going to be posting a ton of content from CPAC. We have former heads of state. We have former U.S. ambassadors. And they're all going to be on giving us some really great insight into current threats and emerging threats. Because remember, the State Department just opened a Bureau of Emerging Threats. So watch out for that.
Yes, make sure you follow the 11 o'clock hour. I just subscribed on YouTube the other day, so make sure you are subscribing to her channel to get all of the behind the scenes. So far, I know today's truly day one with the speakers taking the stage. What are you looking forward to the most?
I'm really excited about my interviews that I have coming up. And I guess I'm just looking forward to experiencing CPAC, seeing it in full swing today, seeing all the crowds get here. There's already some great Trump themed outfits. I see people wearing a freedom outfit, so love seeing that.
Absolutely. It's always great to see all of the people and the themes that they have. You see people in their sparkly sequin jackets and clothes and just a lot of patriotism. So it's a lot of fun here at CPAC as always. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by and for everything you do. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you next week here on LindellTV. Always a pleasure to have Sierra on, foreign policy expert, always giving us the inside look and details on what's going on all across the world. So, Sierra, we appreciate you. And, of course, we appreciate you as well. We are going to take another quick commercial break, and we'll